All right, let's talk a little bit more about the U.S. strategy to fight ISIS in Iraq right now. Joining us is Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. She's a Democrat from Hawaii, a member of the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committees. Congresswoman, thanks very much for joining us. You're a combat veteran. You deployed to Iraq voluntarily twice with your fellow soldiers of the 29th Brigade back in 2004, eventually serving 2 tours of combat duty in the region. So when you see what's happening in Iraq right now, knowing that almost 4,500 U.S. troops died in Iraq, thousands of others came back severely injured, do you ask yourself, as so many other veterans are now asking themselves, what was this war all about?
Yes, Wolf, I do. And I think it's important mostly for our veterans, for our service members who sacrificed their lives there in that country, and for the American people to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes of the past and that we recognize and really look hard at what's happening on the ground in Iraq, recognize who our enemy is. We heard Secretary Carter mention the other day about how he recognizes that the Iraqi military lacks the will to fight, which is a good recognition. But the question that I have now is, will the administration actually change their current strategy, change their policy to make it so that we are actually making the primary recipient of our military aid, whether it's weapons, equipment, intelligence, the Kurds and the Sunni tribes? These are groups of people who have been proven, they've been tested. We fought shoulder to shoulder with them against al-Qaeda in the past. And now they have the will to fight. They are our troops on the ground, and they should be the ones that we should be providing our primary support to in order to defeat ISIS, because they have the will to fight.
Because you make a good point. There's the Kurdish fighters. They have their own separate militia. The Iraqi Sunni fighters, they have their own separate militia. There's the Iraqi Shia. They're largely backed by Iran. They have their own separate militia. They're all pretty dedicated. The weakest link seems to be the Central Iraqi Army, which the Defense Secretary of the United States says simply lacks the will to fight. Yet the United States keeps supporting that weakest link, the Central Military of Iraq. That's a problem from your perspective, isn't it?
Yes, Wolf, it is a problem for a few different reasons. One is this is a strategy that's proven to have failed, not only recently, but really even through the Bush administration. When we had Maliki in charge, we were providing weapons and money and resources to this Shia-led government that persecuted the Sunnis, completely left them out, and really created the situation that we see today, where you have ISIS taking advantage of the oxygen that this policy has created, where the Sunni tribes essentially have been driven into the arms of ISIS for protection. This is the problem that I see with the current offensive that's happening right now heading into Ramadi. This is being led by the Shia militia, who named this offensive attack a name that is extremely incendiary and offensive, specifically to the Sunni tribes. So this is only going to make the sectarian divides deepen. This will make matters worse. And ultimately, again, this will push the Sunni tribes closer and closer into ISIS arms, at the end of the day strengthening ISIS rather than defeating them.
As you know, the Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter, he told our Pentagon correspondent, Barbara Starr, that the Iraqi army, even though they had thousands more troops in Ramadi, they simply lacked the will to fight a few hundred ISIS terrorists who came in there. Very similar, by the way, to what happened a year ago in Mosul, when the Iraqi army also lacked the will to fight. Today, Jen Psaki on CNN's New Day, she's the White House communications director, she offered this reaction, sort of a vote of confidence in the defense secretary and what he said. Listen to this.
Let me first say that what Secretary Carter said is consistent with what he was seeing and hearing from the ground, but also the Iraqis themselves had acknowledged that there were some command issues, there were some issues on the ground, and it's something they want to adapt to as well.
Do you agree the Iraqi army lacks the will to fight?
Clearly, the Iraqi army lacks the will to fight, evidenced by what we've seen in Mosul, what we saw recently in Ramadi and many other times, where they cut and ran. They dropped their weapons, the weapons that the United States provided to them and which have ended up in the hands of ISIS. We've got to look at the motivation. They lack the will to fight because they're fighting for this fictitious thing of a country called one unified Iraq. You have the Shia militia who are very motivated to fight because of sectarian reasons. You have the Sunni tribes and the Kurds who have been very motivated to fight to protect their territories and their communities and their families to defeat ISIS. This fictitious goal of a unified Iraq that this Iraqi army is supposedly supporting, essentially they're the army of this central government in Baghdad, not this country of Iraq.
Yeah, it seems like they're basically in charge of Baghdad, protecting the millions of people who live there, but not much else. At least that's the impression you get listening to experts at the U.S. Department of Defense and elsewhere. Congresswoman, I want you to stand by. We have more to discuss. We'll continue our conversation with Representative Tulsi Gabbard in just a moment. Welcome back to our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer reporting from Washington. We're back with Representative Tulsi Gabbard. She's a Democrat from Hawaii, a member of the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee. If the President of the United States, Congresswoman, were to call you and say, all right, you served 2 tours in that area in Iraq, you know the region, you understand what the military is all about, what should the United States be doing next? What would you say?
Well, the first thing that we need to do is we really need to be making sure that the primary recipient of our support through arms, weapons, equipment, intelligence, training needs to go to the Kurds and to the Sunni tribes. These are proven, trusted partners that we have worked with in the past successfully to defeat al-Qaeda. We need to work with them as our troops on the ground now in this fight against ISIS in Iraq. We need to step up our airstrike campaign to make sure that we are dealing these decisive blows against ISIS in a very targeted way to stop the momentum that they have been building. As they capture more territory, as they capture more ground, this just goes to add to their ability to recruit more fighters to show that they're actually winning in this battle. And we need to make sure that we put a stop to that. And we need to make sure that we stop continuing this failed policy of supporting and propping up this central government in Baghdad and this fantasy, really, of a one unified country of Iraq, and support this 3-state solution of empowering the Sunni tribes, empowering the Kurds, and the Shias, each of them having 3 autonomous territories, rather than continuing what we've seen really has failed for so long. By doing this, we can get rid of the oxygen that has allowed ISIS to maintain its stronghold here within this area of Iraq.
There's so many experts on Iraq going back over the years, including, by the way, when he was a senator, the Vice President Joe Biden, they basically said there should be 3 autonomous areas. This whole fiction of a unified Iraq, it was controlled by a dictator, Saddam Hussein, brutally over the years he was in power with his Ba'ath Party. The whole fiction of a unified Iraq is simply that, a fiction. There should be an independent Kurdistan, a Sunni area, and a separate Shia area. That's something you would support.
I think it's not only would I support it, I think it's critical for us to be able to get rid of these terrorist Islamic extremist elements like ISIS from this region. We've got to look at the fact that Iraq was created, this country of Iraq was created not by the people who live there, not by the Kurds, not by the Sunni tribes or the Shias, created by these outside elements with these lines that were drawn that had nothing to do with the territories that were held by these different tribes. As a result of that, we've seen these sectarian battles that have gone on for really generations. And now, because of the United States supporting this central government in Baghdad, previously led by Maliki, now continuing here with Abadi, it continues this fictional idea that Iraq can be a one unified country when you have the Kurds and the Sunnis and the Sunni tribes and others saying, we want to fight for our own territory, empower us to be able to govern and secure the safety of our communities and our people. We need to provide that primary support to them in order to do that and to push ISIS out and defeat them.
Tulsi Gabbard is the United States Congresswoman from Hawaii. Congresswoman, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Wolf. Good to see you.
Thank you. Up next, Hillary Clinton is counting on African